Well, what better way to start the day than having a look at this old Leyland. It's a Leyland fire engine. You can see by the registration number HY, it belonged to Bristol. Yeah, it's one of Bristol's old engines. Now this was used, I would think, around about the 30s. I haven't got the date of it, but believe me, they built some tough old vehicles. They were built in Leyland in Lancashire. It's pretty self-explanatory. They had a petrol engine. Most of them back in those days were started on the handle. Now, what a difference between this and the modern fire engine. This was in the day when the driver and all the crew were out in the open, and I remember as a kid seeing the fire engine on a very few occasions where they were all sat along the side there with the big brass helmets gleaming. It's somewhat different now, isn't it? But just look at the quality of the restoration of this old character here, and it's nice to know that someone takes the time and pleasure in keeping these old vehicles on the road. It really has made my day to come and be associated with this wonderful old Leyland. There's a bit of music to start off with. Well, we started off by talking about this old fire engine, and we've looked at a lot of other interesting vehicles throughout the day, but now we've found something else of interest, and that's Dave, who owns this old machine. What year is she, Dave?
1931.
31. I said about the turn of the 2030, so that was a good guess. How long have you owned it?
3 years now.
3 years.
Yeah.
What a find. Were you ever in the fire service?
I'm afraid so. 22 years.
Nearly all preserved fire engines belong to preserved firemen. And she's a lovely vehicle. What fire service were you in?
I started my career in Wiltshire and went up to London to finish it off.
And then you found this and fell in love with it.
Well, I've known about this vehicle for a long, long time, and I never ever thought I'd ever have it. I've been a lucky person.
I'm sure you look at it that way too. And of course, a vehicle like this quite cheap to run, I suppose.
Yes, when you win the lottery. Yeah.
What are we talking about? Running
with the recent increases in the budget, it's just come up to £1 a mile.
Yeah, and you've come a long way from home, but you deserve a medal for bringing it down. But we're glad you did, because it's well worth looking at. And Leyland's and Dennis's built 90% of the fire engines, I suppose, before the war, didn't they? And reminds us of the days when they all sat along the side. You got the full gear, you got the brass helmet up there.
Oh, certainly, yes.
Yeah. Dave, thanks for coming all this way and all that expense.
Thoroughly enjoyed
it. It was worth it, I'm sure. Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers, Dave. Well, that's a fine start to a story of fire engines, isn't it? I suppose everybody, all the young boys anyway, when they were little, wanted to be a fire engine driver. And there's still quite a lot of grown-up men enjoy it now. Not only those at work, but those, a lot of them ex-firemen, who decide to collect vintage and classic fire engines, and that's what this programme's all about. Now, here we've got a fine old timer here with the solid tyres. Now, that's the fire engines I suppose I remember, first of all, as a little lad, but they wouldn't do too well now in modern traffic. But that's how a fire engine was originally designed. Open work so that the, up to about, half a dozen aside, I suppose, firemen could go to a fire with a ladder on top and no bodywork for their protection. The only means of announcing their arrival was the noisy bell that they clanged above them. Now this is coming on a little bit later now to the firm of Dennis. Again, the old solid tyre one, that was a Dennis, and this is a later Dennis. Dennis being a great producer of local authority vehicles and fire engine vehicles, etc. There she is, the big Dennis. Old enough to be still equipped with the bell. The fire service goes back many, many years, but it wasn't always a national concern as it is now. Lots of fire brigades belonged to insurance companies. And if you owned a firm or a big residence, then you, on your wall, you portrayed a plaque that showed that you had paid up your dues for the fire insurance. And when the fire tender arrived, they would check that that was their plaque on the wall, otherwise you wouldn't get your fire attended to. That's when they were owned by fire insurance companies. Another big ERF. Many and varied are the chassis on the present day fire engines. Before the war we had a lot of Leyland and Dennis. There were others as well. quite a lot too. I remember our local one at Shepton Mallet on the Mendip Hills was a converted Rolls-Royce car. Big heavy chassis, capable of taking the ladder and the lads with their big helmets. Coming steady, at a steady pace around the British countryside, as opposed to a roar when they're going to an emergency. And there's something thrilling, isn't there, about the fire engine turning out. I remember my home near Wells. There used to be a fire service there, and two of the fire engine drivers were brothers, and they had some big powerful twin motorbikes. And some of the local people used to turn out to watch the fire engine turn out, and others used to watch the two lads racing to who was to be the first there to drive the fire engine. Those were the days. These collectors do a wonderful job because they preserve our history, especially that of the fire service. And these fire engines that go to the rallies invariably are fully equipped with their old original equipment. And I have known an occasion where one saved a drastic situation at a rally through being there on site, because there's always a time lag for the National Fire Service to turn out to an emergency. If you've got something like this on hand and the occupiers and drivers know how to handle it, well, we're in luck. Very popular chassis in the 60s was the Bedford TK. We see a fine example of that here now. It was a lovely lorry, the old Bedford TK, quite an innovation in as much as it changed the face of our commercial vehicles by throwing the cab well forward of the front wheels. Not the first time it had been done, but it became very popular from then on through the introduction of the very good Bedford TK. Petro engine. Nearly all fire engines in those days were a petro engine because they warmed up quicker. The old diesels were something of a sluggard back in the far-off past, and to get to a fire would be a rather laborious procedure. The blue flashing lamps came in the 60s. Then, of course, the twin-tone horns. As traffic got noisier, so the emergency services had to get noisier to announce their presence. Quite good vehicles to own in preservation, because they aren't worn out by any means. A lot of these serve many years and become outdated by the very style of their equipment. But fire engines are usually low-mileage vehicles because they aren't tramping the roads day in, day out. And of course, other chassis that we found very useful came from America. To the good medium-sized chassis wasn't available very much in this country, so we went to firms like Dodge and GMC and sometimes Ford. Here's a fine example of the American chassis here, no doubt with a big V8 petrol engine, about 7 litres. Gave it a good turn of performance. I don't know how the present owner manages about the fuel bill, because they were a little bit hot on consumption. Quite nice wandering around a show. Some of these shows are specialists for emergency vehicles, and others are just a steam rally, or something where you've got your collection of commercial vehicles and emergency vehicles. But you can walk around, it's amazing where these different emergency vehicles came from. You'll see the names on the side from the various cities and counties, and some of them from private factories. We always associate the colour red with fire engines, but of course they're red and silver, red and aluminium, and some got big flashy stripes on now. But of course during the war years, from about 40 onwards, they were painted a drab grey. I dare say this was for camouflage purposes when they were fighting the huge fires caused by the air raids. Well, We can't have an emergency service, we can't have any parade without a Land Rover appearing in it. I suppose this is one of the most useful vehicles ever produced in this country, and we've produced quite a few. But Land Rovers, they've been on the run now since 1948. This is a later version here, but they have been a great use to the fire service. There's no doubt about that at all. With this type of orthodox Land Rover, and sometimes with a forward control, and some with the 6 wheels. But Land Rover certainly contributed many, many thousands of chassis to the fire service. Yeah, something we can be proud of in this country is the production of Land Rover, and I did hear once that there's a huge percentage still in existence of all the Land Rovers ever produced, probably a bigger percentage than any other vehicle. This is another interesting little vehicle here, the Carrier Bantam, based on the Commerce chassis. As I said, all these chassis constructors contributed towards the fire service. Carriers, of course, were a smaller version of Commerce, and Commerce produced an excellent chassis. And always loved the Commerce shape at the front, and I remember buying a little dinky toy one when I was a young lad. They were so common then, were the Commerce fire engines. Another fine example here of a lovely old Dennis, what we remember as a typical fire engine. And there's not much doubt in my mind that this old dear here would have been in service in Coventry during that tragic period in World War II when the Luftwaffe almost demolished Coventry overnight. And there she is, enjoying retirement and a pleasant day out. And as we wave off the Bantam on its run, let's go back to something more from World War II. Well, good old Fords of Dagenham, they produced quite a few vehicles for the war effort. This is the Ford Watt 1. Ford always used the prefix letters WOT for their vehicles used by military. And this is an RAF crash tender. And it's the only one of its kind, I believe, in the country now. And the owner, Don, was very fortunate to find it. It's got that well-known old Ford V8 engine in there. In fact, it's got 2. There's one driving the pump up the back. 4-speed gearbox, and that typical lovely song of the Ford you hear there. Still equipped with the mechanical semaphores on there. And if we can call Don across. Don, can you come and give us a bit of gen on this a minute?
Yeah, it's what they call a 45 monitor. Being that it was built in 1945, because they had them 1943, they modified in 1944, then they modified again in 45. So it's basically the most modern one they had, wartime fire tender. It works on chemical, it carries 300 gallon of water and 100 gallon of chemicals, which is virtually blood. That's what they tell me is. It's blood, a mixture of blood and water.
That's good stuff for putting the fire out, isn't it?
Yeah. Then it comes in, it's worked by a separate V8 engine.
Yeah.
Which is on the back. It's then pumped through, and there's a big mixer in the back that mixes the chemicals to whatever grade they wanted, because there's the valves to put them whichever they want, which was pumped out of the monitor at the top and 2 monitors, one each side. So that was basically for the outside of the crash.
Yeah.
And this is what they went inside the plane with. That is CO2. And there's 90 seconds worth in the 4 containers.
90 seconds. So you can get the CO2, but you can't get the blood very well, Don.
Well, that is it, yeah.
That is a problem. But
this went in, and they went in with this switched on, and the pressure from that, they went into the plane if they could with it, for the rescue, any crew.
Am I right in saying she was once used down on the Locking Aerodrome, wasn't she?
She finished her life at Locking Aerodrome, yeah.
Yes, I understood that because I remember it in a scrapyard. And the dear old scrap dealer didn't want to get rid of it for a long time.
The story, that's right, Maurice Weeks. The story behind it is, it was on loan to Western Airways from Farnborough Air Establishment. Western Airways went bust, and it was supposed to have been cut up, but it must have came out the back door into the scrapyard. Knowing that, I know that for the chap that prototyped these, and he had a register of every one that was made and where they went. There was 130 of these made. The war ended, and that closed the production.
Most of them cut up, no doubt.
They were
because not a vehicle you can use for civilian purpose.
Some went to Australia on the Woomera ranges, atom bomb testing. They went to Christmas Island. Some went to Rhodesia. And he had a register where everyone went and where they were at this time.
Well, this is typical of, Don's typical of these collectors of military vehicles. He just doesn't say, well, that's a nice old vehicle. They do all the research they can. And when you've got one as rare as this, it's well worth the research. Thanks, Don, for your help.
I've got the records in there from the day it left Dagenham, even down to when they had a door changed or anything went wrong. Who drove it, how many miles they did, where it went.
Well, after that interesting chat with Don there on a rally field, we're back in the middle of a city now where there's a road run on yet another Ford based on the old 7V chassis. Fitted again with, as we were talking to Don later, with a Ford V8 engine. These were built in their millions. Now at Bedford, we saw the TK earlier. This is the later bodywork on a Bedford. Very similar running gear though. Of course, it wasn't the factories like Bedfords and Fords and Dodges and etc. who made the actual fire engine. They merely supplied the chassis, and all sorts of firms provided the equipment and bodywork. Very popular fire engine parade here at a well-known rally in the west of England. Here's one of our typical Dennis's. I had a very interesting day at Dennis's a few years back on their 100th anniversary, and saw the whole history of their fire engines down there. It's a wonderful firm, good, solid, reliable vehicles. And again, our little Carrier Bantam. Bantam, Comer, part of the Roots group. The cars, of course, of that family being the Humberas and Hillmans. And here's a typical Leyland chassis. One of the most attractive. How did Leyland get so much attractive appearance out of just a square radiator? They've got a certain class of their own, haven't they? We spoke of Land Rovers earlier. Here we've got, based on the Range Rover, but this time 6-wheel drive. Quite a versatile vehicle, that one. And a Morris commercial. Not so many of these to be seen. This is the old CV chassis, 4-cylinder, side valve engine, 4-speed gearbox. Reliable as clockwork. Very well built vehicles for Morris commercials. This one would have been produced in the late 40s. But that is a Morris cab and all on there. That's identical chassis cab that you would have seen on the flatbeds and tipper lorries of that era. Now we're going to have a noisy parade now as they come around. Let's sit back and listen to this. You'll be able to hear all those sirens and bells are clanging, and enjoy the arrival, this time in a peaceful situation, of the fire engines. Well, I hope you enjoyed that noisy parade. Now we're going over to have a look at something a little bit different now, something from across the water in the United States, the bigger ladder than we usually see over here. Well, my colleague and friend Nigel James is here to have a look around now. I've done my little bit. It's cheerio over me and it's over to Nigel.
We are still looking for Nicky Robinson. Nicky Robinson, 10-year-old boy in a light blue.
Well, with me now is Peter Moore from Coulsdon in Surrey. Peter, a rather magnificent fire engine, if I may say so, behind us. What's the history behind the model itself?
Well, it was introduced in the early 60s in America as one of their very first hydraulic platforms. This particular one came from Pensel in New Jersey originally, was sold on to Catawissa, and we bought it from a dealer after that.
Tell me, how did you find it? How did you actually come to find it in the first place?
Well, the chap we know out there is a dealer, as I say. We bought a couple of trucks off him and we said to him we fancy one of this make, and he said, I know one, I will find it for you. And that was it.
Now, what's the year of manufacture of this particular model?
This one is 1966.
And you mentioned as well a little bit earlier on about the hydraulic system. I think I'm right in saying that America was way ahead of us, wasn't it, as far as hydraulics was concerned? What's the story behind that?
That's right, yes, they adopted what were originally street lighting wagons as fire engines originally, which developed the hydraulic platform from there. And they were way ahead of us. This was withdrawn while we're still building them.
The storage of such a large machine must cause you some problems. Where exactly do you store it?
In a large barn.
And did you actually find it in this particular condition when it came over from the States?
This is almost exactly as it was withdrawn, yes.
Now everybody who looks at a fire engine always likes to know about the boom and how high does it actually go. How far does it go?
It goes at 80 foot, this one.
And what about any mechanical stories when you first received it? Any interesting stories to tell us about that?
Well, yes, we picked it up from the docks at Southampton in January and got about 8 miles outside Southampton when the rear differential failed and snapped the prop shaft. So it was towed back, and this is its first outing since I got replacement parts for it.
Well, it's looking in pristine condition now, Peter. We hope that you enjoy the rest of the show here at Crystal Palace.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
By the steam engines.
Well, it's the turn of firefighting vehicles now. This Austin K2 is looking in remarkably good condition. Kevin Cartwright is with me. Kevin, what's the story behind this one?
Well, this vehicle, along with a few others we're going to see, I'll show you shortly, is owned by the West Midlands Fire Service Preservation Group, of which I'm a member. This is the oldest vehicle we possess, and it was in a bit of a state when we acquired it. It's taken 15 years to get into this state. They were generally used all over the country during the Second World War. This is what they called a type of utility vehicle. They also put on the back of them turntable ladders. Some were four-wheel drive, some didn't have ladders, some were ambulances.
Let's take a little.
So on and so on.
Let's take a little wander and see what else we can discover about it.
Yeah, it's a straight six petrol engine. We could take the cover off and show you, but it's a bit awkward. It's a crash gearbox. That is to say, it's a 4-speed crash gearbox. If you miss a gear, you have to stop and start again.
Right.
If we come around looking into the cab, you can see it's pretty basic. There's just a starter, a choke. There's a speedo and a fuel gauge, and that's about it. The brakes are virtually non-existent on these vehicles.
Is that right?
Yeah, you do need.
So I want to ask you to start her up and ride it then.
Thank you.
Not too far.
Yeah. Moving around the vehicle, it's just this is a rear wheel drive vehicle. It's mainly used for pulling a fire pump, which I'll show you shortly. And moving around to the back.
Yeah.
As you can see, we have 2 stretchers, which are used to carry. Ceiling hook, used for pulling ceilings down in wrecked buildings, obviously. old argon lamp there, which is original.
I was going to say that's a pretty large one, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. We've got some of the original uniforms in the back, gas masks that they used to carry. The two heavy levers, wooden shod levers, they were used for getting the vehicle out of the mud if it ever got stuck there.
What sort of district would this have worked on
These-
originally?
This particular one worked down in Kent, but as I say, that they got all over the country, literally. I mean, these were the sort of standard vehicle during the war because they were so reliable.
Is this the
original wooden ladder? Yeah.
That's the original one there, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the pump that the vehicle would tow. It's a 1,000 gallon a minute pump. In there is another Coventry Climax petrol engine, which will, as I say, it'll deliver 1,000 gallons of water a minute. And again, used extensively during the war and during the Blitz.
What's so significant about that 40D there? Is that a
that was
district code? Or?
That was a district code for. I'm not quite sure, but it was down in the Kent area, and each unit was allocated a number. That number was on the side of the pump, albeit faded, so we just restored it to what it was.
Yeah, firefighting is certainly in the prime here today. We've got a whole range of firefighting equipment, which we'll probably take a look at in a sec.
Yeah.
This one here.
Well, this one, this is the second vehicle that we've brought here today. This is a Dennis F8. This is powered by a Rolls-Royce petrol engine, straight out. This dates from the mid-50s and was used by brigades all over the country. On the top there, you can see the ladder on its side is what's known as a hook ladder.
Yeah.
I don't know whether your cameraman can pick it up, but there's a big hook on the front of the ladder.
I can see it, yes.
And these ladders were used in pairs, and what happened was a fireman would take the ladder, he'd extend the hook onto a windowsill, he'd climb up the ladder, he'd take the second ladder, hook it onto the next windowsill, climb up that ladder, and he would scale the building, and if necessary, he'd pick someone up, put them on the shoulder, and come all the way back down.
The original fireman's lift.
Yeah, which was quite hairy at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Again,
lots of levers and dials here as well, I notice.
But basically another 1,000 gallon a minute pump to the uninitiated. What we've got here is basically the water comes in there through the inlets, goes round the water pump, and is delivered out to the branchmen and jets via those two outlets. Alternatively, you could use a hose reel for a smaller fire, and behind that bulkhead is a 300 gallon water tank. But again, if you were using the main jets, that would be gone in a few minutes. Yeah. But again, this one has been restored by ourselves over a period of about 15 years. But again, it's a crash box. If you miss the gear on the road, you have to stop and start.
Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. What's the history behind this one?
Well, we acquired that off Staffordshire. They didn't want it, and it's an American Jeep. They used it as a major rescue unit for road traffic accidents. The mast on the top extends, and you can light a whole area up of, say, a motorway carriageway. And this used to carry, it doesn't carry anymore, but it carried equipment for cutting cars and cutting people out of cars, basically, and any ancillary equipment you'd need on the motorway. Before the days when the police used to arrive, the fire brigade literally carried everything on this type of vehicle.
Yeah.
Sadly, we don't do that now because the police do it for us. We just take a specialised fire unit, then the police do the rest.
I can see a lot of gear on the back there.
Yeah, generators mainly to power the lights when the masts when they're up, and then we could put lights to cone off an area. We'd light the place up. It'd look like Debenhams at Christmas. But,
so it comes very handy then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's used now for when we use the vehicle now. We're here for 2 days. We run generators for caravans, and we light over the back there. We light up the camp areas during the night when all the public have gone home, which is so it serves 2 uses. Really.
Very, very useful. Do you get a lot of help from the local fire service here? You know, do they sort of support you in,
Yeah.
in what you try to do?
Yes, well, they do and they don't. It's you know, it's like everything else. It's a public service now. Budgets are tight. They do try to help us, but we're more or less self-supportive now. We do have a store selling model fire engines and things like that too, so we can put fuel into these things and keep the maintenance of them. As you can appreciate, they do take a lot of upkeep.
Yeah, I can imagine so.
Yeah.
How long has your society been running?
Our society's about 20 years old now.
Oh, so it's
Yeah.
been in existence some time.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have many members?
We've got about 30 members now. Some of them drive, some of them don't drive. Some are good mechanics, some are not. And then all the wives are involved, you know, with selling the models and that. So it all comes together sometimes.
Vintage firefighting next. This
Yeah.
one must go back quite some time, I think.
Yeah, this is a privately owned one, but he's in this section today. But a private individual has restored this one, and this used to belong to a works fire brigade, as you can see on the side of it. But it was purchased from Pilkington Brothers and totally restored to this condition.
I can see a very well-preserved bell there. I mean,
Yeah.
presumably that works.
Oh, it does, it does. Indeed, it does.
Uh-huh. Well, it's quite a rarity to be sitting in an open cab. It's a Dennis F2 NDJ 869 is the registration number. It's quite a star as well, Bob, isn't it?
It is really like, yeah. It was one of the last Dennis's ever built with an open cab by Dennis's. Many people come to me like and they say, that can't be right, not 1961 like. And I say, well, it is like, yeah, you know. And it was the forerunner of the alloy ladder like, because the vehicles prior to this was built with a wooden wheeled escape. So it is just a rarity in that respect. The vehicle itself like was built by Dennis's, John Dennis's, like for Pilkingtons, which is the glassworks at St Helens. This one actually served at Doncaster, but on the closure of Doncaster factory, like it was brought back to St Helens, and it served its last years at St Helens alongside of another Dennis F2, coming up for disposal in 1972. The guy I bought it off actually bought it from auction in 72, didn't do a lot with it. He used it once for a wedding, and then when I found it, like it was in a farmyard.
Really?
And it'd been there for an awful long time, since the early 80s, and I bought it from him like, and when I sort of put a battery to the engine and put some petrol in, like she started up. It's got a big B80 Rolls-Royce engine in it. I'm very, very, very thirsty. It does about probably 6 miles to the gallon. Or is it 6 gallons to the mile? No, I think it's 6 miles to the gallon. Like it feels like 6 gallons to the mile. But she goes a dream, like, you know, for its age, like she goes a dream.
All the equipment as well, I notice, is it's quite sort of centrally housed. Is that significant to this particular model, or is that?
It is for the open cab vehicles, like, especially with the hose reel being central, like, because if you look at the later ones, like they're built on the back end, possibly in the side lockers.
Yeah.
Whereas these, like the lockers, they didn't have a great deal of space for the lockers, you know, for equipment in them. So they tended to put all this stuff on the top of the bodywork. It's what they call a braidwood body, whereby you just have the officer in charge and the driver in the seat, then all the other firemen sat on the sides like with their feet on the running boards. You probably get, you know, in the day this was on the run, you probably get like 6 either side or something like that, like, you know, so you could have a hell of a lot of firemen turning out on one fire engine.
It's got quite a powerful searchlight as well, I noticed.
Yeah, this is a feature of all the older fire engines, like with the big, I think they're called Francis searchlights, and they have about a 200 yard cable on them. Also in the lockers, like, you've got the tripods. So, you know, in a case of you want to light up a building, like, you just take it away from the building, switch it on, put it on the tripod, and you've got lighting. The suction, like, are all 5-inch. The pump is a 1,000 gallon a minute pump. It will pump 1,000 gallons of water a minute.
So it's quite a powerful one.
Oh yeah, it's a big pump, like, yeah.
I said in my introduction there, Bob, that this vehicle is a star. It actually has starred in a film, hasn't it, as well?
Yeah. I have been told that in the film Go to Blazes, where there was a few sort of criminals really, like they wanted to do a robbery, and they got this idea like that if they were in an emergency vehicle, police and everything wouldn't touch them, and all the traffic had moved to one side, like to let them through, like so it'd be an easy getaway. So they decided like they were going to find a fire engine. So they went to a showroom, must have been like sort of in the London area or whatever, and in the showroom like were two London Dennis fire engines, like I think they were F108s or something like that, or 101s, and this one was alongside of them. And I think because of the cost of it at that time, it was too much for them to be buying, like it was too much for what they wanted, like. So they went out in the end, like, and bought an even older one, like, you know. So yeah, it does have its day, like it was in Go to Blazes, like.
So a star is born and a star in the making.
That's right, yeah.
We've moved along the line now, and London Fire Service saw this particular vehicle in action. Kevin, tell us more.
Oh, well, this is a shelve oak on a shelve oak chassis used by the London Fire Brigade and indeed by the West Midlands Fire Brigade, and I'm sure by many others. The West Midlands didn't particularly get on with this type of chassis because there was a lot of roll on the bodywork, particularly when cornering. The cab carries a crew of 5, and these type of appliances were in use the mid-70s to the start of the 80s. This particular one does actually still carry a wheeled escape, which I'll show you on the back. London Fire Brigade were in fact the last brigade to carry wheeled escapes.
Should we take a little wander?
Yeah.
I noticed as well, actually, that the engine size is phenomenal, 5,400 cc.
That's right, which is a lot for the diesel engine, and they do about 8 to 15 miles to the gallon.
So quite thirsty then.
Yeah, which is another reason why the local authorities phase them out. So on the back we have a wheeled escape, which I mentioned earlier, which it's quite rare to see on this type of fire appliance, but as I say, London were the last to remove their escapes. As you can see, this particular escape is made of steel with wooden ladders. Now the early ones were all wood, and the later ones were all steel. We've got a bit of a mixture here in that, so we've got a bit of both on this one, so it is quite a rarity. But as I say, and what happens with this type of vehicle was it was dropped down off the back of the fire appliance. It took 4 firefighters to handle this, and if you can imagine, when it dropped down, it tipped down onto these small wheels, and the ladder pointed skywards, and it was wheeled around literally to the fire. This type of ladder was developed during the war, in particular the Blitz, to wheel a ladder where the appliance couldn't go, etc., down narrow streets, and that was its main concern. If you see any old film, you will see lots of these things smashed to smithereens during the Blitz, and quite a few firefighters lost their lives whilst operating them.
What wood is that there?
This wood, this is wood. It's they use oak and something else called lignum vitae, which is the hardest wood you can possibly get your hands on. And the lignum vitae were used in the braking system on the ladder, which you can't see. What you did was you wound these levers, and the ladder would extend. And to bring the ladder down, to save the ladder slipping, it has a braking system. So if you did slip on the levers, it would brake it, and the thing wouldn't come down and collapse on you.
Kevin, as a preservation society, with all of these vehicles that we see here today, can you put a value on each one? Do you value them, or as such? Or
well, no, they're only worth something to a person that wants them. Really, a vehicle like this to someone who wants it's only perhaps worth £2,000 or £3,000. Although the actual, when they're new, a new fire appliance today costs in excess of £30,000. So that's unkitted, then it has to be kitted out. So they depreciate something terribly. I mean, the ATV we looked at earlier, the World War II vehicle. I mean, it's quite rare, but its value is virtually nothing, really. It's just, its value is in the time and the fact that it's what it is, and people like to see it. So that's its value.
And as a society, it's your interest that keeps them running.
That's right. If we're preserving history, really. If we didn't do it, we'd lose a little bit of heritage and history of this country. And that is really the main reason why we do it and why all these vehicles are here today. Really.
Well, I'm sure everyone would like to know a little bit more now about the very special fire engine that we've found here at Crystal Palace. Joining me is Jürgen Wirth. Jürgen, you've travelled quite a way today, haven't you?
Yes. From South Germany, I came near Stuttgart, 40 kilometers east of Stuttgart. The city is Schwäbisch Gmünd.
And how long did it actually take you to get here today?
Well, about 2.5 days.
And how was your journey from Germany?
Very lovely. We visited friends in Aachen. Next day we drove to Ostende, and then the next day to Ramsgate and to London.
Now, you've been to Crystal Palace before, haven't you?
Yes, last year. We have been here with 3 cars from Germany.
And how did you find last year's show?
Oh, it was very interesting, and this is the reason why we are here this year again.
Now, tell me more about this fire engine. I believe it's just after the Second World War it was manufactured?
Yes, its the age is the year is 1949 it is built. It's the Opel Blitz, and the body is made from the company Metz, Karl Metz. It's a special builder for fire engines.
And what about the engine size in particular on this model?
It is a 2.5 liter 6-cylinder engine from the Opel Kapitän.
Jürgen, what about the restoration of this? Do you carry out much restoration on this particular model?
No, I bought it in very good condition. Only things I had to repair was the brakes and some repainting. Rest was okay.
And what sort of road speed would this get up to, do you think?
Oh, not too fast, about 75 kilometers per hour.
Well, Jürgen, thanks very much for talking to us. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show here at Crystal Palace, and thanks very much for talking to us.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you. You have seen our kitchen?
I did.
Just a reminder, don't forget the refreshment facilities. I've been told that I've been forgetting the refreshment facility. I forgot to mention the toasted sandwiches, apparently.
Well, we've all heard about London's burning. I'm not sure about Brighton's burning. This group are going to tell me a little bit more about their background. With me is Tony Hicks, who represents the Horsham Vectrum Fire Engine Preservation Group. Did I say that correctly, Tony?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Now, what's the history behind the group?
Well, the history behind the group is that we were formed about 12 years ago. First of all with the Shanmason steamer, and then we acquired the Dennis Light 4 from Ciba-Geigy Pharmaceuticals, which was their works fire engine. The vehicle was originally commissioned by Cuckfield Urban District Council in 1938. It ran its right the way through World War II, and after that it was East Sussex Fire Brigade took it over, and then after the end of its life in about 1960, Ciba-Geigy Pharmaceuticals took it over as their works fire engine. We have taken it over from them, and now, as you see, it's preserved, and we use it mainly as a charitable fundraising institution. Our group is to run, actually raise money for the Fire Brigade Benevolent and other nominated charities, i.e. there are St Catherine's Hospice at Crawley and certain other ones that we nominate. But we've, so far we've raised in excess of £30,000 in about 10 years.
And all that money benefiting local charities?
Absolutely, yeah, that's what it's all about. That's why we dress up like this on a bank holiday and come out looking, it's our fourth HGVC, which we subscribe to and thoroughly enjoy, so it's they're very good.
The leading question of the day is, what attracts you to dress up on a bank holiday like this in these costumes?
A difficult one, but we do this most weekends in the summer just to raise money for charity. So therefore it's not a lot different to us really.
RTH-432S is a 1978 ERF water tender. This appliance is powered by a Perkins V8 diesel engine with an automatic gearbox. It carries 400 gallons of water and is capable of pumping 500 gallons per minute, and spent most of its operational life at Gorsinan Fire Station until it was transferred to Glynneath Fire Station. It was used as a spare appliance and was used by the West Glamorgan County Fire Service Training School until it was made redundant in 1992 and was then taken into preservation. So, from the 1930s right up to the modern day, I'm joined now by Rob Haynes. Rob is the foreman here at the Mid and West Wales Fire Brigade workshops at Britton Ferry in Neath. Rob, to say state-of-the-art for the machine that's behind us would probably be an understatement, I would have thought.
Yes, everything is up to the minute, in fact, from, well, the truck, the tools on it, everything is new and as modern as we can get at the moment.
What would the cost of one of these be to manufacture, do you think?
Round about £200,000 mark.
So quite a lot of money then.
Quite expensive, yeah.
Tell us about some of the facilities on board, Rob. What sort of things could we expect to see on here?
Well, just next to us we got the hydraulic cutting equipment, which they use on road traffic accidents and the like. We've got rams to go with it, so everything just snap-on fit. They can change from tool to tool and do any kind of work with that. That's the cutting gear.
What's that that blue thing just behind you there? It says casualty shield.
Yes. What is, if somebody's trapped in a car and they cut in or got to break glass, they put that between the glass and the casualty, and then that stops any flying fragments.
Uh-huh. And I see the other side, we've got things like spades and that kind of thing.
They carry all hand tools they can use for digging out. They got tools behind us for propping. They've got airbags they can jack with. You know, variety, all kinds of lifting gear.
And I notice, obviously, because it's a multi-purpose vehicle, not so many ladders on it, but it has got the obligatory ladders, I see.
Yeah, just on the roof there. If they need anything else, the water tender is carrying larger ladders. This end is just for reaching nothing of great height.
Rob, just finally, how long do you think the manufacturer would take to put one of these machines together on its production line?
They normally take about 3 to 6 months from time of delivery of the chassis to complete.
So even that's quite involved then?
Oh yeah.
Well, we've had a fantastic view of fire engines right through from the 30s through to the modern days. So from all of us here at Britton Ferry, we hope you've enjoyed it. Until the next time, from me, Nigel James, goodbye.